we know what drives you. We know what your goals are. The one thing that we really love talking about here on the RentPrep podcast is not so much the investing strategy and that sort of thing. It's really the personal experiences that you've had as a landlord. And I know there's one particular experience that I've been dying to ask you about and get more information on. That's an experience that you had with a prostitution sting in one of your buildings that you somehow happened to be a part of. So could you dive into that a little bit and tell us what that was like and how you handled that as a landlord?
Well, sure. And I definitely want to clarify after that intro.
Yeah, right.
I wasn't really a part of this.
Yeah.
Got to choose your words.
1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah.
Welcome to the RentPrep for Landlords podcast. And now your hosts, Stephen White and Eric Worrell.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to the RentPrep podcast. We're super excited to have a guest on today that a little bit of reciprocation. I just did his show not long ago, which is the Old Dawg's REI network. And it's Bill Manassero. And Bill, welcome to the show. And tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I am a real estate investor and based out of Southern California. We've got multis around the states and Memphis, Atlanta, Indianapolis right now. And we have the landlord thing at a distance, pretty much our focus here. And but we encounter a lot of the same things that people that are landlording or handling their own properties as well, because I deal with my property managers on a pretty daily basis. But we're not only investors, but we also have a podcast too called the Old Dawg's REI Network. And just to kind of summarize here, I for the last about 11 plus, almost 12 years, my family lived in Haiti, and we have a nonprofit organization called Child Hope International, and we work primarily with orphaned, abandoned, and at-risk children in Haiti, specifically in the Port-au-Prince area, the capital city there, while we were living there, we were kind of wrapping up our missionary term there. We're looking back at the States, coming to the States, and kind of thinking, gee whiz, what are we going to do? I'm not the kind of guy that can sit down for very long. And I had, before going in the mission field, I had plenty of years of corporate experience as well as entrepreneurial experience. And I thought, well, maybe I'll get a little business going, and ended up getting into real estate investing. Actually, while I was living in Haiti, I hopped on a plane, flew out to Memphis and Atlanta, bought 3 properties, came back, and that kind of started this thing that has really been growing. And since then, I've committed to acquiring or controlling 1,000 units or doors before the end of 2020. So it's a pretty aggressive schedule we're on. We're basically having to double the number of units we acquire each year. And then by 2020, we'll have over 1,000 units. So that's kind of the plan I'm on. And while I was in the midst of that, I had a lot of people, especially people my age, and I'm 62 right now, and I have a lot of friends and others that are either going to retire or already retired that are really interested in sort of either looking to supplement their retirement or be able to do something while they're retired, and they were real interested in what I was doing. So I started telling people about it, started emailing people. Before you know it, I'm just kind of overwhelmed with responses and getting back to people as I'm updating them as I'm acquiring properties, and decided to set up a blog instead. I thought, well, maybe I could do updates on this blog, and then people can read the blog and find out what's going on. And then the blog sort of evolved into a podcast, and now we have a podcast that airs on Mondays and Fridays, where we not only interview other real estate investors and people related to that, including Steve, who was a recent guest on our show. But we also I give updates and sort of a view from the trenches, so to speak, as I'm out there bumbling along, trying to do my best to not only acquire properties, but to make them profitable and to be able to grow that not only into something that will be something that'll help us in our retirement, but also we're using those funds to help our mission in Haiti as we continue to be active in it, even though we're in the States, as well as just something that we believe will be a nice legacy to leave for our children as well. So that's where the Old Dogs REI network came from, and that's been a love too. We were having a blast doing the podcast twice a week as well.
Yeah, your podcast is a lot of fun. For anybody that's listening that ever wonders what I sound like howling like a dog, you'll want to check out the Old Dogs REI Network podcast with Bill Manassero, because he gets me to howl like a dog as he does all of his guests, and I love it. I love that hook that you have on the end there, and really it's just a fun take on taking a serious subject and looking at the lighter side of it, right?
Well, if you can't have fun doing it, then why are you doing it? That's kind of my philosophy here is, we're old dogs. We've kind of paid our term in the wrenches, should I say, paid our dues in the trenches, should I say, and we're ready to to really enjoy what we're doing. This shouldn't be a burden. It shouldn't be something that you have to do.
I love the the purpose driven behind your business. The nonprofit organization, the mission to help children in Haiti. I think that's awesome. Do you think that that's something that you came about because that's just the person you are? Does it have to do with the fact that you're an investor that's in the retirement age? Is this how other 55 and up investors sort of think? Is that their mentality is now they want to start giving back? It's just something that we don't hear enough of, I feel like, in the investor community.
Well, I've been real fortunate, in interviewing the folks that I have had on my show, some that have some great charitable causes, some nonprofits that they've formed as well. And I think that's just something that kind of comes as a natural sort of move. I think there's only a certain point where you get there and you're thinking, well, what more do I want? How many cars do you want? How many homes do you want? Where does it really have any real solid meaning in your life? And to be able to invest in people's lives in other countries or in our own country, really to me is kind of where I think a lot of folks that at least that I've encountered that have been successful in real estate investing have gone. And I think that's, to me, it's a joy. It's very much a part of who we are and what we're about. And I believe, you're making an investment when you're making an investment in a person's life, to transform lives and people that might not have had hope in the past is, to me, that the best place I'd want to put any of my funds.
And realistically, it's such a break from the norm, right? We're used to seeing most content driven out of a real estate investor's perspective being like, how I made $1 million before I turned 26 and, how to 10X everything. And everything is just all about, building your wealth and making your money. I feel like it's just rare and honestly just a really nice difference to hear somebody say, yeah, we're doing a lot to give back. And we have this thing that we're doing that we really believe in. And that's that's really the motivation that drives a lot of this. I love that.
It's a blast for us too. We love to go over there and just to oversee projects. We got great people on the ground there. A lot of Haitian nationals that are actively running things, and it's for us just a real joy. Especially some of the kids that we started with years ago that are now graduated. They're married. They've got jobs. They've got families, and these are kids that. At one point, we saw them laying in the street using a cardboard box as a cover for, the night and just being able to survive day to day and to see those kids and these new lives that they have for us, it's just, it's an overwhelming joy.
That's awesome. Now, I know that your goal is to hit that 1,000 units by 2020. How close are you, and are you on pace to be able to do that? You got 3 years left here.
Got 3 years left. Right now, 2017, I'm looking at 150 plus units right now. We've been looking in what we call emerging markets in those areas that we feel are on the upswing. Maybe they've got a lot of new employment in the area, new businesses, all the right stuff that make for good apartment purchase and also a strong demand for rentals. And so we've got to the end of December here is our goal. After that, then we double what we have this year. So each year we're doubling. Our last goal last year was a 36. So technically, I should probably be around 72 units we're pursuing. But for us as owners and landlords, there's over 100 units you can afford to have on-site staff that working for you. You can have the property managers there on site. You can have the maintenance people and others. So it makes a little more sense. If I'm going to go for 72, I might as well really go for 100 plus and be able to have that a little bit easier to manage.
Right. All right. So we know what drives you. We know what your goals are. The one thing that we really love talking about here on the RentPrep podcast is not so much the investing strategy and that sort of thing. It's really the personal experiences that you've had as a landlord. And I know there's one particular experience that I've been dying to ask you about and get more information on. That's an experience that you had with a prostitution sting in one of your buildings that you somehow happened to be a part of. So could you dive into that a little bit and tell us what that was like and how you handled that as a landlord?
Well, sure. And I definitely want to clarify after that intro.
Yeah, right.
I wasn't really a part of this.
Yeah. Got to choose your words.
Let's really be careful how we say that. No. One of the tough things, getting started later in life, like if I would have started investing in my 20s or 30s, I would have learned kind of sort of natural over time, but I'm on this really tight timetable, so I've got to ramp up very quickly, and so there are some built-in inherent challenges. I would think the normal investor may be somebody who, for example, rents a single-family home, and they rent it out, in their neighborhood or in their city. And they're probably doing all of the management. They're coming over, the toilets break, they're running over there, they're fixing them, or what have you. And there's that process that people go through. Then you start getting more units. It gets a little more difficult to manage by yourself, and then you might call in a professional property manager or what have you. Well, I had virtually no experience. I mean, I bought these first 3 properties while I was in Haiti. I was an absentee, landlord there, and so I wasn't really able to get involved with sort of the day-to-day. So I learned a lot of stuff as time goes on. And we there's a 22 unit that we have in Indianapolis, and ran into a bit of a challenge there in that right after purchase, we had a very aggressive schedule to ramp it up, to upgrade, do revisions, just to sort of bring things up to code in some areas,
Sure.
Put in new electrical, things like this. So we had a real aggressive plan. And my property manager at the time had a family tragedy, and it was just really, really tough on him and his staff and others that were working in his company. So I made a decision there's one that I didn't make lightly, but I basically said, look, if we're going to be able to do this, I either have to fire this guy or I have to do something else. And I really just didn't feel right firing him because he'd done a good job to that point. And I really felt that, it wasn't his fault what happened in his family. And so I, went and talked to my wife. We prayed. I ended up hopping on a plane and flying to Indianapolis. I moved into one of the empty units in our apartment building, and I was there committed to stay there until we could get things up to where they needed to be. So I didn't know if I'd be there a week. I didn't know if I'd be there 3 months, but I went there with that commitment. And it was one of the most valuable experiences I had ever had in my life in terms of just understanding what goes on behind the scenes. I got to know my tenants. I got to go into the property manager's office every day and got to see how things worked from their end, what cycles they have during the day, things that they do, and just got a very good understanding of the management and the landlording aspect of that particular property. I also, while I was in this unit, I was also rehabbing the kitchen while I was in there.
As well, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, why not? I'm
Yeah.
there. I'm going to work. I'm going around the community. This is what I call tenant stealth tenant marketing, where I just went in full force to not only ramp up and get a whole bunch of good applicants in so we could get some good tenants into some of the empty units as soon as we got them upgraded and rehabbed, to be able to put some good people in there. So I'm talking to businesses in the area, talking to businesses of like 300 or more employees. And I would meet with the HR manager and give them a special flyer for a discount if any of their employees needed a place to stay, that they could stay there and get a month free rent, and doing things like that during the day, as well as trying to find good tenants and going online, setting up a website, all these different things. And they would come in, and I have these tenants coming in, and while we're doing this construction, I'm showing them places, I'm having them fill out applications, we're doing tenant screening, we're doing all this stuff, and trying to get good quality folks in there. And so in the midst of all this stuff, I was also trying to build relationships with the key law enforcement in the area, because it's an area in transition. It's sort of in the path of progress. So there's some good things happening, but it's taking time. And so a lot of these buildings in the area have had their share of drug dealers and so forth in the area. So as I'm talking to the police and we're building a relationship, they tell me that there's been a prostitution issue going on in the area. And he said, "Do you have an empty unit that I can use to do just a little sting operation?" And I said, "Sure, why not? It's not being used, and I'm in the building, so I can, make sure everything's fine." So what they did is they literally set up in this second story apartment, a corner unit. So they had windows on both streets there, and they were able to set up this operation. They had a undercover cop, a female cop that was out there posing as a prostitute, and they were not only stinging, the guys that would be the Johns, I guess, that would be looking to buy a prostitute, but they're also looking to connect with prostitutes in the area too. So there's all this stuff going on. We got these cops in this apartment. I'm down here. I'm showing people places. We're rehabbing. There's like all this stuff going on at the same time, and I'm just kind of going through the processes here. And I'm meeting some real great tenants. I get this one gal that came in who had a real strong application. Looked like she had good credit. Everything looked really good. And so I wanted to submit it to our property management, who would send it through the screening process. And I'm thinking, no, this is going to be a good tenant. I already have an apartment that this would be ideal for her. Everything's great. And I'm just going through this whole deal and got to know the cops. We were bringing them coffee every now and then and everything, and had a real good relationship going. And one of them came over to me and he was saying, "Well, how are things going?" I said, "Fine. We look like we got some good tenants. I just interviewed a gal here. It looks like she should be real good for apartment number 4. And he goes, "Well, just a thing about her."
Oh, no.
And he goes, "We know her. In fact, she's got a lot of clients in your building." And I go, "What?" And he goes, "Yeah, she's one of those we're trying to get right now." And what she was doing is she wasn't really looking to rent. She was casing the place.
She was a mole. She was looking. Yeah.
She was a mole. And she walked in. She saw where the cops were up in that corner unit and everything. I was totally blown away that this happened. I was like, I was really disappointed. I lost a good potential tenant. But the other part,
That's one way of looking at that.
Yeah, right. But the other part, yeah, I was really like, oh gosh, I didn't even know. I couldn't even tell that this lady was what this guy said it, and apparently he
Bill,
knew.
that's like a really interesting point, though, because we talk to people all the time who sometimes say they don't need to run a background check or they don't need to, they just go on their gut, right?
Right.
So your gut was telling you that this is like a perfect tenant, and it turns out that she's a prostitute.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's like a pretty far range right there as far as like from what your gut was telling you. Not saying she may have paid rent on time, but probably not somebody you wanted in the building, because if you have the cops there all the time, to some people that's going to be a deterrent, but to other people, they're going to love that. So it's kind of just this like natural thing you have set up there now where you're going to start attracting the right type of tenants who have nothing to hide and appreciate the fact that there's cops there to keep it a safer neighborhood. So that's really interesting.
Yeah, I even, stepped down the limb and said, look, if any of you guys are looking for a place, we could give you a special discount just to have you as a tenant. I think that would have been also a real strong component, especially when you've got some issues in the neighborhood. To have a cop in the neighborhood would have been real good.
Yeah. And so what I'm curious of now is, so this is all past. You've obviously moved back to your home in Southern California. What sort of residual effects have you seen from creating those relationships with the police, that local police department? Do they still keep in good contact? Do they call you or tell you when there's an issue, or has everything just sort of dropped since you've been gone? Or I'm just curious how that relationship goes moving forward.
Well, they're working directly with my property manager, which is great. So if there is a need in the future and we have an empty apartment, they will let them use it. And we've got that good relationship going now. So I really handed it over to the local team there. The outgrowth of all of that effort for that, I ended up staying 1 month, and during that time, not only do we complete most of the rehab that had to be done, not all of it, but I'd say a good 80 to 85% of what we had to do. That was done. We got moved up from like about a 63% occupancy to 95% occupancy. So it did work out well. We got some great tenants in there that are still there. It was a good experience. I learned tons. And not only that, but what we did in that area has really had a sort of a reciprocal effect. And some of the other landlords, we've been upgrading our landscaping and signage and things like that. I'm seeing others in the area just copying suit, doing the same thing that we're doing. And it has really made a difference for the community. And we're also, now that I've talked to those folks, we're in communication with each other. So we also have that advantage going where we know, and if we see anything suspicious at their place, we're going to be sure to call them and so forth. So we have that good community or neighborhood watch type effort going on now.
That's awesome. And I know for, we work with some municipalities that really do a lot to reach out to landlords and build a lot of relationships. And, overwhelmingly and unanimously, the landlords agree, it is such a benefit to have the police department on your side, to have a good relationship, to have good communication. And some of the benefits that we hear about is, especially being an out-of-state landlord, you may not know. Now, you're in a different situation because you have property managers, people on site. But if you're managing a single-family home, you may never know if the police have been called out there or if there's issues or problems until it's too late. Maybe you get nailed with a nuisance ordinance, or it gets to the point where you now have to evict the person. But having that relationship with the police department, I feel like, is so great because it could give you a little bit of an inside track, right? And then they're the people you want to be in the good graces with, right?
Exactly. You really do, and you want them to feel welcome in that neighborhood so that they'll come there frequently, and they will. And sometimes what's really neat is that these guys do just come by and just say, "Hey, we're just in the neighborhood. Just want to see how things going. Or everything okay?" I mean, this is ideal. This is what you want to have, and that just sends a strong message to the tenants, to the community. They feel safer, and it just has a strong positive effect.
So, Bill, just to kind of wrap up this podcast, I just had one question for you. So you kind of mentioned how you've been kind of attacking this quickly and adding all these properties and learning a lot. So if you could talk to yourself right before you flew from Haiti and got those first rental properties, what is the one thing you would tell yourself back then that you've learned now that you've only learned from this experience of doing this? Like, is there one thing that you've really learned that you would have told yourself, like that kind of insight back then?
Wow, there's sort of a lot of things. So just narrowing it down is a bit of a challenge here. But I think the one message that I would have is the first three properties I bought were turnkey properties, and a lot of times. I'm not sure if I would buy turnkey again, but a lot of times people will buy turnkey properties and they think that they don't have to do the due diligence. That the people that bought the property, they rehabbed it, they did all the things, and that everything should be fine. I just would say, at least for myself, anyone that's thinking of doing that, and even starting off with turnkey, that you've still got to do the same due diligence. You still need to get the property inspector there. You still have to be able to do a strong background check on the property managers that come with that turnkey, and make sure that they have the kind of reputation that you would want managing your properties. And so there's my one takeaway is that do the due diligence, just like you were buying that property from scratch yourself and going to rehab it and do everything that the turnkeys do. Make sure that you just really do that. Do your numbers as well. I mean, make sure that your numbers are right in the community. What are the rents going for? What do they say is a good rent? And what are the actual rent stats? What are places actually renting for? All that's part of the due diligence. And I would just say, make sure you do your due diligence.
Love it. And so, Bill, just want to let people know again where they can reach out to you or where they can find you or listen to your podcast. It's Old Dawg, and it's DAWG. So Old Dawg's REI Network.com, right?
That's right. DAWGS. Yeah. Old Dawg's REI Network.com. Right. And REI stands for Real Estate Investing Network. So, it's pretty easy. You can actually type in dogs wrong and still get it. And
nice.
so you'll be able to get it.
Well, and I love the fact that, it's Old Dawg's. I think it's maybe your original idea was, I'm going to, have all these guys that are sort of in my age group that are listening. But for a guy like me, I'm, in my, I'll say mid 30s.
I'll go late.
Yeah. Okay. So somewhere in between mid and late 30s. But I listen to that and I think, okay, super relevant to me, but also you got these guys, there's a wisdom that comes with it, right? There's a wisdom that comes with age, and I think that shows in the podcast. So I love the podcast, and I love how you structure it. And, listen, you got me out of my comfort zone and made me bark like a dog, and I feel like I should thank you for that, Bill. You opened up some new doors for me.
Well, it's one of those things where I'll have somebody on, sometimes just somebody that's really not comfortable with the dog thing, maybe they're, an accountant or an attorney or somebody else. And when it comes to that, it's really funny. I usually prepare them and I say, just be prepared. So for the end of the podcast here, anything you've said that's given you any credibility at all, it'll be gone.
Right. Well, it's funny because the day that we recorded, I'm in my office and I knew it was coming and I had shut my door and I'm thinking, I hope nobody in the out on the screening floor in the screening department can hear me. Sure enough, I get done with the podcast. I go out to the screening floor and I get a bunch of weird looks and everyone goes, were you howling in there? What? We heard something weird. I say, yeah. That was part of a podcast that was on. So, yeah.
I love it.
Yeah. So I had some explaining to do, but I got it. It was great. I loved it.
Oh, that's so funny because we just had a guy on just recently from Microsoft, and same exact thing. He was in his office. He's an old dog getting ready to retire. Has been buying rental properties, the whole 9 yards. And he did the same thing, and all these people came running in. And he said they thought they had a heart attack or something,
Oh yeah, that's they're coming in to check on him. You all right? Just a welfare check. Everything okay in here? I love it. Yeah. Well, it's awesome. And thank you so much, Bill, for being on. Everybody, again, go check out Bill's podcast. It's Old Dawg's REI Network. And again, just a wealth of knowledge, a lot of experience, a guy who loves to share. And my opinion is doing it for all the right reasons.
Well, thank you, Steve. I appreciate it. And for those listening, especially if you are an old dog and you are investing later in life, Steve and what he does at RentPrep, definitely you guys have to check out. And because really, without that kind of help, without the team is so important to be successful in this business. And Steve and his team would be behind you in any of your tenant checking and all the stuff that's required to get that good solid tenant in there. And without good tenants, I mean, you're going to be struggling, believe me. And so this is not something you want to skip over. I just highly recommend Steve and what he does as well.
I love it. Thanks for thanks, Bill. I appreciate that. I scratch your back, you scratch mine. I love it. Yeah. No, we appreciate it. And you're right. That's a huge piece of it. And, any good landlord or landlord that's been around a while will tell you, good tenants make good landlords, right?
You got that.
Yeah. All right, Bill. Well, again, thanks for being on the show. And it was a pleasure having you on.